So this is really extraordinary, actually, to see Friday morning, 10 to 11, so many of you, so many friends. We were a little bit worried about the timing of this conversation. Clearly totally wrong. The magic of breakfast. No? And this gathering here is actually making the point of this introduction kind of obsolete, because what we were going to talk about before we're going into the conversation with Stephanie Comilang, and then the presentation of the Sharjah Biennial 16 program is actually friendship. Yes. And relationships that take time, and relationships that need to build over time, and collaborations that then can grow out of these relationships. And we've been talking about this for such a long time, and so therefore this is a moment where so many things come together, which is really beautiful, and finally we're starting to collaborate.
Yeah, we've had many conversations in the same space, actually, in the same spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful to see many partners here as well. So we talk about collaborations, but we see many collaborators in terms of curators, artists, practitioners, and academics. Everybody's here. I think more and more everybody realizes it's not sustainable for us to try to overproduce as artists, also trying to produce for every single biennial, but coming together to do something that is meaningful. And I think we all have this, most of us anyway, have the same vision and mission at the end of it, to support artists, to support communities, to, talk about issues we're facing today. I think the Venice Biennale, Foreigners Everywhere, is very important. There's still so much hatred going around. A few people heard some stories, but there are so many racial attacks happening right now in Venice, verbal and physical. So I think it shows that the work is not done, and we're only going to be stronger together to fight against, racist minorities. And I think, solidarity is the most important thing. Many countries around the world are struggling. Of course, Palestine is an issue that is happening for 75 plus years. We need to talk about it. As we said, it's the minority that don't want us to talk about it, but the majority care about human rights. The situation in Sudan, in the Congo, in Kashmir, Armenia, the list is endless. And I think it's really important that when we talk about human rights, we talk about everybody's rights. Yeah.
And I think the incredible thing that you do in Sharjah is that it is meant for Sharjah, right? Very often I wonder about the Venice Biennial. It's obviously it's a fantastic international platform, but I'm not necessarily sure that it's actually addressing and meaning Venice at all, right? And so I think it is important to actually situate ourselves somewhere, to be able to do this work, to be able to do these or foster these long-term relationships, to invite people onto then a platform and share this platform. And I think this is something that you've been doing over many, many, many years incredibly well, and I think one can see it every biennial, every triennial, every March meeting. Is the community is growing, and it's really staggering to see who you are able to bring together, and all of you are a testament to this today. It's really fantastically moving to see so many friends here.
Yeah, for me, like you said, doing it for Sharjah, but the first experience I had doing it outside of Sharjah was Lahore Biennial, which for me is very special because it's an opportunity for me to be to be trusted as an independent curator as well. And it was really special because I wanted to think of place. I know Sharjah very well, but I need to know Lahore. And if anybody understands Urdu, I'm Lahori bilkul, Lahori through and through. You know, it's a special place in my heart. And working in Tunis with Dream City was also very special. And I just came from Matanzas in Cuba, where I did a biennale of like 5 artists, you know, 5 projects working with communities. And I think it's important that place and site is meaningful. And when you do something, it's not about an exhibition that has to be created and toured and shipped, but it's like, what can you leave behind in terms of working with the team is very important. You know, sharing experiences, you know, forming artist unions together, you know, things like that. And I think, yeah, I think that creates a trust and a bond with artists that you continue to work with over the years. Yeah.
And I think also amongst organizations, no? Sharjah Foundation, TBA21, it's not easy to collaborate, no? Because our organizations are not necessarily thought to collaborate. They're actually thought to compete, no? We have to create the most original thing, the most original exhibition, commission the biggest project, and this and that and the other. And so to actually, over all of these years, have these conversations very slowly, start building trust, building friendship, and then finding ways to collaborate like we're doing now with Stephanie Comilang's project that is a commission, a diptych. In 2 episodes, we were able to show the first episode earlier this year at the Thyssen Museum in Madrid, which was curated by Chus Martínez. And you're going to do the second episode
with Amal Khalaf. Yes.
Exactly. Who we invite now onto the stage together with Stephanie to kind of lead into the conversation. And then, you didn't know about this? Don't worry, just jump on and...
Thank you.
Should you not invite me? I'm not going.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, it's amazing to see so many faces here. Thank you so much to everyone at Ocean Space, to Marcus and Hor for that beautiful introduction, and for you know, starting the morning with friendship. I'm really excited to be part of this ongoing conversation that we've been having for a while, and we'll be sharing with you a little bit of the story of In Search for Life, as the story so far. So, and we are working together now with Stephanie, imagining what it means to commission a process, a research, an artwork in 2 episodes, thinking about what a diptych means in a practice like Stephanie's. And it was an absolute honor to get to witness that opening, a beautiful installation at the museum earlier in March. And I guess I just really want to hand over to Chus and Stephanie to hear about the origins of the story of part 1.
So thank you very much for being here this morning. To all of you, as you may know, TBA21 has 2 spaces. One, it's at the National Museum Thyssen in Madrid, and the other one is here, the Ocean Space. And it is in Madrid that we had the pleasure to present the first part of the work of Stephanie Comilang. That is, we joined forces with other partners to co-produce and expand the work, which is the second chapter that's gonna go and be in Sharjah. So first, I want to invite you all to come to Madrid, still a month to go, and then to go to Sharjah to see the new second part of the project, or the diptych, as we prefer to call it, as it is unfolding in a very complex subject where we need time and again to give an experiential dimension. So The installation in Madrid is composed by 2 very large video screen projections and a series of textile sculptures where piña fabric is embroidered with motifs of butterflies. So just I'm a very bad person to describe anything, but more or less this is what you see. And the installation is kind of embracing you because these 2 projections make your presence and your body not only in the middle of it, but you kind of mirror yourself and your body into the histories and into the narration of that projection. I was reading the other day, as I am these days, Korean poetry, and there is a line that kind of stuck with me, which is, it says, become a person that produces hope. So I think that right now is super important not only to show, not only to remember, not only to correct, not only to be better, not only to be aware, that I think that we all agree on that ground. We all learn that this is something, at least one not so big part of our society, but we hope this part would grow, is that we know it. We know the values we all want to embrace to construct a complete different society where coexistence is actually not a must, but a desire that we feel, and we have enough curiosity to actually give part of what we have to others in order to generously make different energies flow and produce a new identities that are osmotic with each other, that are not closed in themselves, that are able to give and able to take from others, which is difficult. How can we learn to do that? And I would say you learn to do that through works like what Stephanie has created in Madrid. As you know, Spain, one of the biggest colonial empires, is, like many other empires, not only ignorant of its own past, but actually also not even aware that we need to reflect or to apologize or to have a language that encompasses that incredible history that goes for centuries, because we did not learn it at the school, and then all the opportunities that we had to encounter the people at the streets, we miss them because we think we are at home and some others are not. I don't know from what this idea comes from. But what you see in this work is actually an opportunity not only to restitute the objects and the past and the guilt and the bad moods, but to restitute the dignity through listening and being together. I think that through a very beautiful but simple act of producing a togetherness in the presence, in the space, she made us feel with both the seafarers of Philippines telling the story about migration and labor in the sea and how important and unique they are for actually the whole enterprise of trading and capitalism in the world, and the butterflies. And of course, we never put in question the migration of animals because it's a migration that we think it occurs, it happens. There is no borders for them. You would not stop animals in the border in between Spain and Morocco. You would actually not stop the fly of the butterflies. You would only stop people, even if they need to migrate for exactly the same reasons, which is simple survival. And in that sense, in that very simple act, she reunited the migration of these 2 entities, the human and the non-human, in the simple act of searching for life. So I would like to invite Stephanie to say a few words about what this work represented, and also to present it in Madrid. And not only that, we have been creating an incredible series of public programming that is ongoing, and it's also many times in streaming. And I'm saying that because we're here in presence, and it feels like an incredible gift that we can be here and be with each other and chat and so on. And I would stress the incredible importance of public programming as something which is not in parallel to anything, but fundamental to what we do. So, Stephanie?
Thank you so much, Chus and Amal, and thank you so much for coming. This is incredible to see so many people for a talk like this. So I started thinking about the project Search for Life. It started actually with a short video that was a commission from Ocean Archive, from you guys, to put online. And I was thinking a lot at the time, so this was during Corona, when we were at home, and through the news there were stories of seafarers being stuck on their ships. And a lot of the seafarers, actually 25% of the world's seafarers, come from the Philippines. And the story was that they were stuck on their ships, not able to return home, and a lot of them were in their own home port. So the idea was, imagine being stuck on a ship, seeing your home in front of you, but not being able to return to it. And so the video basically is from the perspective of a seafarer talking about seeing his home in front of him. And it's voiced by my father. And it's a 6-minute video. And so this is where Search for Life comes from. I was thinking a lot about seafarers, and then also at the start of the project, my husband actually had a dream about butterflies, and the exhibition was, the dream was he had a dream about, I had an exhibition and there were butterflies painting. And so, yeah, I just started thinking about the plight of the butterfly and where they were going, and yeah, it sort of started from there.
Perhaps you can say something about, you have not seen the exhibition perhaps, but there is this fabric that covers mannequins as if creating some sort of phantasmagorical image, which is center of the space, where you see one screen where the butterflies are kind of being butterflies, and on the other there's a testimony of the seafarers. And this cloth that is covering the mannequins is piña fabric, which is actually made with the fibers of piña, which is actually not a fruit from Philippines, but it's kind of a product of the colonialism, since it's coming from Mexico originally. And perhaps you can say something about this kind of juxtaposition of the fabric and the more, let's say, haptic with the image. And I must say it's so very important, because now we hear an exhibition which is very large, but the question of experiential, very multidimensional spaces is really super important to understand. So, adding presence and adding the haptic to the visual is nowadays fundamental to an understanding through the senses.
So as we know, the pineapple didn't come from the Philippines. It was from South America and traveled from South America through the colonial trade routes to the Philippines. And in the Philippines, it became such a part of their everyday life. It became a fabric that the Filipinos used to wear, traditional clothes for weddings, and then they started embroidering on the fabric. And in the exhibition, because it was based in Madrid, I started thinking about the mantones de Manila, these shawls that are very still traditionally used, and in its name already connotes that it came from somewhere else, the mantones de Manila. And so I got access in researching this project. I was looking at the Textile Museum in Madrid, and I got to see the mantones, and there was scenes of, so they used like oriental scenes basically, and also there were embroidered butterflies and flowers. And so I was thinking about, basically like the trade of the pineapple and where that comes from. But then also, so in the exhibition there are veils of butterflies and also wall embroideries with butterfly vision.
I think that it's so interesting because when I was, one of the strengths of TBA21 is commissioning. Commissioning is probably one of the most beautiful exercises that we have in contemporary art and culture. It means that you put together your thinking with an artist, and then you try to figure out how to produce a new work that gives form and shape to many of the thinking that hopefully produces a new language to name the future. So in a way, it's a collective exploration of the near future through a language that is not yet there. So the work gave me an opportunity to put forward my own ignorance. As I said, coming from Spain, having studied there, I know nothing about the Philippines. So it gave me an incredible opportunity, with all humbleness, to put myself to the service of learning actually what was the route in between Manila and Mexico, to discover many incredible things, like, for example, that the motif of the butterfly that was embroidery actually in China. I think Manila was a hub for the incredible production of goods that flowed Europe through Sevilla, and then all these goods, porcelains and many other things, start coming and shaping the European identity. The flamenco dress that we all know is actually Mantón de Manila from Canton in China. The blue and white motifs of Holland porcelain is actually produced in Canton in China. And actually, it is so interesting that the conversation in between Manila and Mexico is actually a conversation in between two empires, the Chinese Empire and the Spanish Empire, through this kind of trading, very intriguing, interesting moment. So when you read why people were embroidering butterflies, you discover that the myth of renewal and rebirth is actually the butterfly in the Chinese culture. It is interesting because probably you have if you visit contemporary art exhibitions, the question of renewal, it's a word that comes and pops up again and again, because we actually hope not only remain in an entropy of destruction, we really want to think, and we force ourselves to imagine the possibility of a rebirth and a renewal. So the butterfly is actually that notion. It is an animal, but it is an animal that experiences metamorphosis. But not only a metamorphosis in their body, but in the gender. It kind of embodies a freedom that we don't have as humans. In the ancient Chinese myth, the butterfly was free from the constraints of the structures, political and social structures imposed from humans upon humans. So the butterfly was free even in the realm of the animals. So in that sense, it is incredible that you are seeing the butterfly in Madrid while you are listening to the seafarers sharing the incredible experiences of labor and discrimination and oppression in a way, but they do it with such a freedom that actually you kind of produce an incredible sense of they are kind of giving their life as a present to you, and the experience of being removed from their countries, from their families, from the environments they belong, exactly a little bit like the butterflies, that they just search for another environment just to be able to live.
Yeah, so in the film there are two seafarers. One of them is a seafarer turned into a painter, and he talks a lot about his experience on the ship, but also one of the things was that as growing up, his mother was never around because she was an overseas domestic worker. So for his entire teenager childhood, she wasn't around. And when he turned 18, he started to work on a ship, and that was the time that his mother could actually come back home. You know, so there's this strange thing in the Philippines, and this happens all the time, where these children have no parents because they're working abroad, and then, you know, when they turn 18, they can start working on ships. So they basically are, you know, two ships passing in the night. They never sort of have this child-mother relationship, and so this was something that was really interesting that he talked about in the film.
I was just going to pick up on that, because the thing that really struck me experiencing the work, because we'd spoken about it and I'd heard about these amazing people you were having these conversations with and building relationship for so long with, and there's this very tender way that their stories are held. There are many voices throughout the work, but the way that they were able to share quite difficult histories, not just this idea of separation and exile and being away, but also the real physical struggle and danger to their bodies. But there's something I wanted to hear more about in terms of how you build that relationship with your collaborators, and a little bit about the way that you centered art and expression and song as a way for them to share their stories.
I mean, I think it helps that I'm Filipino, speaking to Filipinos. You know, we talk about our families, we have a common history. And so for me, that's sort of how we connect. Joar, one of the characters in the film, who is a seafarer turned painter. I mean, we're both artists, right? So we have that in common. But he was just so poetic in the way that he spoke, and his paintings are beautiful. You know, he paints about what it's like at sea. One of his paintings is called "The Sea Is Not a Quiet Place," and you know, they're very like gestural, expressive, colorful, beautiful paintings of labor. You know, what it means to be a worker at sea, what it means to be away from your home, what it means to you know, miss your family. And he just had the most incredible stories. And the way that, I mean, how I find the characters through friends. And, you know, I made this film called Come to Me Paradise, which is a science fiction documentary about Filipino migrants in Hong Kong. And I knew I wanted a very personal perspective, this sort of like video vlog perspective. So I looked on YouTube and found a vlog from an overseas domestic worker in the Philippines, in Hong Kong. And so, you know, the internet, as we know, is something that helps us connect to people. So these are tools that I use to maybe find the characters in my films. And yeah.
I really love to speak more also about song, and I know that's something we're thinking about for this next episode.
Yes.
But I just also wanted to maybe just ask one more question, because there was something about the conversation both of you had at that opening where I felt like you were really speaking to the audience in Madrid and kind of sharing the story of the crystal, the origins of this crystal palace in the botanical garden, and kind of sharing a history of this very colonial building that's kind of lost its story or its narrative in that way. And I guess the next stage of this project now, we're going to be going to another port city. And it's a port city that has a huge migrant population. And I know you've already worked there and shown work there, and there's a lot of overseas workers, Filipino diaspora there. I just wanted to, maybe just hear how you're feeling about entering that space and what it means to address the audience in the same way you may have addressed the audience in Spain.
Sure. For me, ideas of home is where I start. So it's really interesting to go to Sharjah, Dubai, and think about that, because it's, you know, the majority of the population are migrants. And so for me, the spaces that migrants create are a place that I start work from, and these are things that I think about, how they create communities. You know, I'm interested in looking at, exactly how they create space for themselves, where they go, you know, the architectures that they set up, you know, what they do in their leisure time. You know, these things are very important to me. You know, I'm not sure what that looks like, but I'm excited to figure out how that looks. Yeah.
It's just incredible to be able to have this conversation over two sites, two spaces, and you're traversing so many oceans with this,
yes.
with this project. But yeah.
Perhaps you can say a little bit about the difference of the filming for the first and the second part of the diptych. Like in the first part, you were mostly filming in Michoacán, where the butterflies migrate, and filming in Manila, interviewing the seafarers. Where are you filming for the second part? You can invent, eh?
Well, Amal and I were talking about pearls. And there's a market in Manila, actually. It's a replica market. It's amazing. If you go to Manila, they sell everything replicated. But there's a huge section in the market of pearls, pearl sellers. And so I'm interested in where that comes from, where the pearls come from, and how that relates to Sharjah, because I think it does, you were saying, yeah?
Yeah. I think we're going to do some pearl shopping. We're going to a lot of markets.
Yay.
And yeah, hopefully doing some karaoke along the way.
No, but I think for this project, I want to look at movement and dance and song, of course, and how that relates to water. These are ideas that I'm thinking about, which are not concrete yet, but invent. I don't know. I'm also interested in macho dancing, which is an interesting sort of now contemporary thing that you can see in the Philippines. Isa Yoksen did a work about it, and so it's this. So you go to a club basically, and you watch these men dance very beautifully, almost like water, you know, and they're doing these really kind of like beautiful sexual moves. And so I'm thinking about that and underwater and movement underwater. Yeah.
Yes. Underwater work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was all right. I want to do an underwater part of the biennial. That would be really beautiful.
Yeah.
If you're holding that. But yes.
So apart from it, I think these two works are going to be shown, one in Madrid and the other one in Sharjah. So it's forcing you to go to both places, which of course you are doing, because Madrid is great in terms of culture and has one of the best social moods right now. You need to experience that. If you are in other parts of the world, that's mandatory. But also, I think that what we need to do is to reflect on the methods that artists are using to help us to think through things that we don't normally think because we are too busy in our everyday life. And I want to remind you that we are in a social political space where one part of it is going to a very long tradition of telling us that the only way of producing a renewal is destruction. And this tension that we are feeling in between renewal as destruction, things need to be very destructive before the phoenix is kind of rebirthed again, and pain is mandatory. This tradition is a very long one, but a very, very heated discussion happened already, at the end of the 16th to the 17th century. And one of the philosophers that opposed to that idea the most is called Baruch Spinoza. So Spinoza was the first one absolutely contesting that idea that pain is mandatory, that destruction is a way or a method that brings any thinking through, and put on the table one of the most contested polemic notions on earth called joy. And of course, when he put joy on the table, everyone started to misunderstood him and thought that he was actually presenting an idea and a mood of enjoyment, of happiness. And it took him his life to try to explain that joy is actually a synonymous of willingness, a collective force that is actually naming the speed of us being able to connect, to produce a space that is fertile enough to make thinking happen without harming anybody, harming anything. So this way of thinking traveled really kind of slow. in our cultures, in the Western culture, I must say, particularly slow, and went through, of course, thinking of Nietzsche, also one of the most misunderstood, misused, misread philosophers, and end up in Deleuze, also in a vague cloud of not knowing what he is saying type of thing, while the other family gain forms of describing the pain and implementing that as a method in our political thinking. I'm saying that because if there is something that is characteristic of the work of an artist like Stephanie, is actually bringing joy as a political experience into the collective space to think about something that can be thought without guilt, because of course guilt travels with us and it's important, but it is also, it freezes us. It is a defensive preventiveness, while we need to implement other modes and other forms of relationship. And I thought impressively bold to talk about the Filipino question in a context as conservative, even if great, like Spain right now. And I think that is exactly what I would praise, and I'm dreaming with seeing these two chapters one day being shown together, because this is exactly the energy that is and needs to be activated, not only through the work, because we are just players into the work. We are as important as every element into the work. Our presence is the communicative, energy that passes the message and passes the energy into the social.
Thank you so much. And thank you both for the most incredibly expansive way that you've started off the diptych, and it's very exciting to be able to hold this process in this next stage of the commission. And I think now we're going to move on, because this is just one of the many commissions that are being presented and birthed as part of SB16. And many of the questions we've spoke about today, questions of home and what it means to carry these stories of home with us through our ancestors and political agency. This is like really some of the main questions that collectively myself and my fellow curators have been asking. So I'd like to thank both of you for this conversation. And also call my fellow curators of SB16 to the stage.
You need it? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Shall we all introduce ourselves first? Well, yeah, I guess so. We're really excited. This is one of the first times that most of us are here. We're actually missing Zainab Us, who is in New York, but with us in spirit. And we thought that today we would be sharing some offerings, maybe reflective a little bit of the way that we, as a group of curators, have been meeting each other through this process of being invited by the Sharjah Art Foundation to dream SB16.
Hello, everyone. What brought us together in our journey with Sharjah, many of us, most of us, have different connections with Sharjah. And this crossroad means the world to us. So we start with this question: what does it entail to carry a home, ancestors, and political formations with you? Our offerings today are a journey in that quest, propositions rather than answers, and offerings as a way to share generosity, speculatively, boldly, in your midst. I want to begin with an image, the ancestral well, pulse to terrain. The Rudabai step well is a cavernous entity streaming 5 stories into the earth, an architecture for fluid crossings, ceremony, and replenishment. It bears a spaceship-like contour. A vav in Marwari and Gujarati languages signifies leading down towards the water level or source. This well is a live pulse set in the ground, ripples of folded and emergent time. A 15th century water monument near my hometown in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, which bears stories of Hindu and Muslim rulers in this state fighting fascism today. It is cosmological storytelling set in stone. It is stories of love and death. Ever since the invitation to conjoin in reflecting towards the next Sharjah Biennial, the stepwells as a leitmotif have been recurring in my mind, in my dreams. The ancestral memory that we've been talking about among us, ancestral memory keeping, is a reservoir that floods the imagination, circulates and conspires in the body as vessel. It is the power of cross-generational recall as forecasting that is fostered in creative capacity. What if we convene around the wells of ancestral placemaking, in defiance of colonial shadows and imperial erasures that wound us as a shape-shifting amnesia today? The well is an index of knowledge. I think of this well also in Bet El Serkal in Sharjah. Many of you may have seen it, where humid drops linger as the underbelly of a well out of use. And yet, this well has reverberations of what it has witnessed in the past of this place and its possible futures. I pair it with a soundtrack that some of you may know of Abdullah Ibrahim, dollar brand from South Africa, who played this track, Water from an Ancient Well, in Sharjah. So this way of thinking about sonic ways of linking across geographies is something that Sharjah has been doing for a very long time, and we are adding to this history. Pulse to terrain, I think of this entwined with the writing of Paul Gilroy in Rhythm, in the Force of Forces, Musical and Political Time, where he talks about colonial and post-colonial histories, the struggle against racism and racial hierarchies through literature's displacement by orature. So really thinking about the primacy of auditory and sonic phenomena as a way to fragment and to oppose political ontologies of oppression. He talks about the place of music and musicking as unfolding in political, social, and cultural movements, about the ways that these embodied practices were supplanted by imperial knowledge forms. We will now listen to a soundtrack, and we are seeing the work of Cassie Namoda on screen.
The women gather because it is not unusual to seek comfort in our hours of stress. A man must be buried. It is not unusual that the old bury the young, though it is an abomination. It is not strange that the unwise and the ungentle carry the banner of humaneness, though it is a castration of the spirit. It no longer shatters the intellect that those who make war call themselves diplomats. We are no longer surprised that the unfaithful pray loudest every Sunday in every church and sometimes in rooms facing east. though it is a sin and a shame. So how do we judge a man? Most of us love from our need to love, not because we find someone deserving. Most of us forgive because we have trespassed, not because we are magnanimous. Most of us comfort because we need comforting. Our ancient rituals demand that we give what we hope to receive. And how do we judge a man? We learn to greet when meeting, to cry when parting, and to soften our words at times of stress. The women gather with cloth and ointments, their busy hands bowing to laws that decree willows shall stand swaying but unbroken against even the determined wind of death. We judge a man by his dreams, not alone his deeds. We judge a man by his intent, not alone his shortcomings. We judge a man because it is not unusual to know him through those who love him. The women gather strangers to each other because they have loved a man. It is not unusual to shift through ashes and find an unburnt picture.
It is not unusual to sift through the ashes and find an unburnt picture. That was Nikki Giovanni, The Women Gather. And Cassie Namada's image, I'm sorry all of you can't see it, hoping for a bigger screen, but imagine it. Cassie Namada floats the fish as a portal of ancestral placemaking and future echo chambers, signaling these beginnings and endings, thinking about the historiography of Mozambique leaking into oceanic cosmologies, war and famine, matrilineal stewardship, and chronicling lines of faith. Another artist, I'm just gonna summon the artists some of them that I'm working with and the kinds of languages that they bring to the fore. Rajni Pereira brings us to rituals of cleansing and the curse as a galvanizing force of crafting other worlds into action. Her femme-animal hybrids are a mythopoetic intervention in a poisoned planet. In her work, we traverse Sri Lanka's cultural histories through shamans, monstrosities, oracles, and medicine makers, trying to comprehend both virulent loss and sentient excess. The oceanic littoral of the Indian Ocean world and Afrasian memory cultures emerge as a common horizon for many of us in recursive journeys from Sharjah to Zanzibar, from Sharjah to Kenya, from Sharjah to Lamu to Gujarat. These are many places that I have been fortunate to visit as part of my research. And with these, I ask about these centuries-long crossings in the waters, meditating on what forms of aqueous residency, itinerancy, and captivity await us. Kaloki Nyamae's Nairobi studio floor felt oceanic to me, and his paintings appear as a navigation system of familial wisdom in mother tongues, steering through civic strife and political failures, thinking about class dynamics and land politics. He takes us together to the water in this painting, and I think of how his paintings call on us to be bold enough to time travel. Can a biennial make room for collective grieving and lament? I'm thinking of us as mourners and lovers intrinsically linked in union and loss, in dynamic simultaneity. And this invitation is also brought in with the work of Pallavi Paul, who creates the stories of a historic graveyard in New Delhi at the time of pandemic, forced exodus, and authoritarianism, imagining this graveyard and mourning as environmental witnessing. Building geocinematic storylines and material encounters in rivers, islands, and deserts is the ecofeminist vision of Monica de Miranda, who is with us and has the spectacular Portuguese pavilion on view in Venice. She thinks about sisterhood as radical kinship, and with her work, I think about the living terrains of dispossession and reclamation, again in the aftermath of war and imperialism. Monica invokes the Pan-African revolutionary intellectual and agronomist Amilcar Cabral, and I've been thinking about his address, The Weapon of Theory, in the first Tricontinental Conference of the Peoples of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, held in Havana in 1966. And I think of it in connection to March meeting and gatherings at Sharjah that are these kinds of moments of convening in a kind of geographic frequency that is rare. Cabral wrote, and I'm going to end with this, when the African people say in their simple language that no matter how hot the water from your well, it will not cook your rice, they express with singular simplicity a fundamental principle, not only of physics, but also of political science. Given Sharjah's commitment to being this meeting place for internationalist convening, we must think about that hospitality as a form of political nourishment today, attuning both to its dailiness, its rhythms, its situated grammar, and the potential for social revolution through artistic practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alia Swastika. I'm from Indonesia and very happy to join you here with all my loveliest colleagues working with that we have been working like more than a year till now. And I want to continue from like how Amal and Natasha presenting their project. For me, like this kind of collectivity, the idea of gathering, of thinking together, solidarity is really becoming part of, and the core framework for my curatorial project. And there will be, now I'm working a lot of commission where I try to gather and bringing up some artists in a collaboration, so like transnational, transcultural collaboration context and collectivity really becoming like the bounding of all the projects I'm working inside. For today, I would like to reading part of the project that now we are commissioning from Ruli Sabara. He is like musician, sound artist from Indonesia, and in the project, he worked with AI, working with technology and the possibility on how the digital future shaping the production of knowledge, but at the same time also rethinking how we rewrite the history of the indigenous community. Maybe we start with the music. Lots of listening for today, I think. Yeah. Ruli Sabara is now rewriting like one of the collection on how a culture being shaped and rewrite in the history. And this is the story of Kawagaka. This is the story of women as the guardian of the water and the soil. The Maka family is a patriarchal family and one of the most respected due to their roles in the Wusa society. As the name suggests, the Maka are the descendants of the caretakers of the land. They master the science of soil, including all the types of plants and their functions, as well as the variety of herbs and trees. Like any other clan, the Maka clan is also divided into several groups family according to their respective roles. Makabaka, mastering the science of plants and medicine and health. Makawanga, mastering the science of mixing plants into food and seasonings. Makala, in charge of planting, including taking care of the soil, trees, and plants. In the indigenous beliefs of Wusa land, which was dated 3,000 years after the birth of Kawagaka teaching, time was an experience in a straight line. Time for both individuals and the universe unfolds in 6 phases: birth, nadu, growth, agaka, travel, angesaka, merging, amu, decay, sazu, and death or return, wami. Time doesn't march forward. Instead, it moves to these phases, creating an eternal, perfect cycle. This explains why the 6 full moons hold very significant role in the Wusa native culture. The day before this full moon, clans and villagers from across Wusa converge at the village of Wusa Asi and make a collective pilgrimage to the river for the Anrazik ritual. This ceremony is a cleansing of sins accumulated over the previous 6 months and a purging of yet unacted malicious intents. As the ritual concludes, everyone washes each other, symbolically syncing body and soul with the cosmic cycle of the time. This ceremony is a crucial activity for the Yabuka Asi clan, residents of the riverside areas who take on the role of hosts and prepare everything necessary for the events. Following the Samasa Marta era, the rivers near Wusa Asi dried up, and the Anrazik ceremony ceased, only to be revived 1,000 years later as Wusa teaching transformed into Kawagaka culture. Thank you.
So I'm going to, is that on? I'm going to stand. Tēnā rā koutou e te iwi i ngā āuatanga o tātou rā. So kia ora and welcome. My name is Megan Tamati-Quinnell, and I am one of the 5 curators. I wanted to start really, firstly, by making some acknowledgements. And I was thinking, I come from a very small country at the bottom of the planet. So to be invited to kind of curate the Sharjah Biennial is a privilege and a highlight. So I wanted to thank you, Hoa, for that opportunity. Also, the Sharjah Art Foundation team who set this up today and enabled me to be here, Jiwon Lee, Judith Greer, Nawa El-Kasimi, and my co-curators, of course. And I also wanted to thank you, Marcus and Ocean Space, for having us here. So back to the question that we all have kind of sat under at this point, what does it entail to carry our home, ancestors and political formations with you? So my offering today comes firstly in the form of a piece of music by Māori musician Marati Kay, conceived and realised for a show I curated but not for the Biennale, and a passage of writing by a musician and artist, Raven Kachon, which I read recently Both are artists in my project and both are developing new works for the Biennale. Can we play Mother's song, please? So that was Maratike, who's a Ngaitahu artist and musician, and as I said, is making a new work, or two new works actually, for the show. As I said, I'm going to also read some writing from Raven Kachon. Raven's writing is about positionality, important to the project, I will realise, and it's from a recent monograph of his work, A Worm's Eye View from a Bird's Beak. His monograph title reminds me of a pā site in Taranaki, where I'm from, called Ngutu Otu Manu, or the Beak of the Bird, the site of a famous battle site led by my ancestor, Tituku Waru, who almost defeated the British. So, Raven's writing is titled Being in a Position. What I read is like the first 3 lines of his writing rather than the full passage because it's much longer. It's writing that resonates kind of abstractly with the Biennale I'm working towards, and I am still working towards it. My music does not focus on melody, he starts. It is not a priority at all. It does not care about pitches or keys or tuning. In most cases, the note can start from any position, nor does it concern itself with rhythm. Instead, it concerns itself with patterns over a long period of time. Personal time or collective, one cannot escape time. There's also a consideration of volume, an acknowledgement of the edges of its spectrum, the inaudible in neither direction, of what has been silenced and what happens when it is not. So that's the end of that piece of writing. So the project, I will realise, is really outlined on this first slide. And it kind of takes its lead from a poem by artist Daniel Boyd. So like Daniel Boyd's work, it's poetic. The project is poetic in its offering and focuses on notions both fixed and fluid, anchored and expansive, and clear and opaque. Can I have the first slide, the other next slide, G1? So the project's really informed by a First Nations positionality related to land and place, and works with a number of propositions that include intercultural resonances, concepts influenced by land and the locality of Sharjah, and notions related to our flawed humanity, ideas of impermanence and of failure. But there's also a virtuosity and a future focus within the project. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's just I thought it was important to point out the things that don't work. So the images I have are really just the selection of artists who were released in the first kind of e-flux and news. What do we call it? Press release. So this first work is Kate Newby, who is a New Zealand artist, but based in Texas. It's a detail of a work called I Can't Nail the Days Down, and really does work with kind of those ideas of impermanence. The next slide, please. G1. This is Michael Parikowhai, he kōrero pūrākau mō te awa nui o te motu story of a New Zealand river. I'm hoping to bring this work to Sharjah. It's a piano, a fully carved Steinway concert grand. And his work really, again, even though he's a sculptor and an object maker, he talks about kind of intangible ideas and talked about song filling a space like no object really could. The next work is an artist called Saffron Taratana, a tūhoi woman. It's a detail of a work called Ngā Hanga Whakaro. She's really a painter. She's a person who stays off the grid, doesn't really show. The last thing she worked on was a meeting house. So she said, I've done a meeting house, what more do I need to do? I have asked her to make new work for the show. She's an extraordinary painter. Has moved into installation, talks about paint as protection, as a feminine liquid that protects and covers, and works a lot with ideas to do with like karakia or prayers and spirit, that kind of thing. Next image, please. This is Kapulani Landgraft, who's a Hawaiian photographer. This is called Ko Ona Ngā Wahi Kapu o Maui. She's been taking photographs for years, over a period of years. These are all kind of sacred sites, really, in Maui, and kind of transporting those, I hope, to Sharjah. She's an extraordinary photographer. These photographs have never been shown outside of Hawaii, so I feel quite privileged. She's reduced the number to 20. I think she had 90. And next image, please. And Kimberly, please forgive me if I say this wrong. This is an artist called Brian Martin. Again, it's a detail of his work, and it's called Bali Thara Buran Gamilaroi number 6. Sorry if I got that wrong. And really, he talked to me about these works, which are mixed media on paper. They're of scar trees and the idea of singing the bark of the tree and the idea of vibration, as well as mark making and relationship to country and place. And the very last image, please, is a work by Ioane Scars called Clown Chamber. She's making a new work, and we're bringing in an existing work to Sharjah. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and I always feel very, very grateful to be sharing space and thinking space with these women around me, and also with Zainab. Very inspiring all the time. So my name's Amal, and I'm, it's a huge honor to have been invited to Dream SB16. Sharjah, for me, is like my home biennial. I'm from Bahrain and Singapore, and Bahrain's just half an hour away. It's the island that's in the Gulf, and I've kind of, as the offering for the biennial, I've framed, I've named the framework Throwing Shells, which is describing, it's the name of a divination practice that is practiced in Bahrain and in many, many islands and coastal communities around the world in different formations. But because it was so close to home, my starting point has been very, very much thinking about what it means to carry home, and ancestral thinking, and our relationship to the land and to the sea with us. And so my grandmother, who was a lamenter in Bahrain, was really the the starting point for how I'm thinking about what a biennial framework can be, what it means to commune and convene women and others in times of great heartbreak in the world. So throwing shells isn't what my grandma did. She was a lamenter, but I used to take her to the Matam, to the community space, where she would, several times a week, support people to cry and grieve and process things in their lives. But I would go to the back and hang out with the other helpers, and there was another reader. So the person holding space, my grandma is called a garaya, but another kind of garaya is someone who will divine futures with shells. So we'd be doing some reading in the back of the community space, I've really been thinking about this idea of casting shells as a way to commune, to think with our senses, to prophecy, to navigate futures together. And I'm really thinking about this as a methodology for the biennial, and also to think about, you know, what it means at this time of political violence and environmental collapse. What rituals do we need to remember and embody to start to imagine a more life-affirming future? And thinking also about what artists, what artworks, and if biennials can be a space of political agency at all. Maybe in the next slide, I just want to show, these are some works by the late Bahraini artist Nasr al-Yusuf. These were actually, I wanted to summon them here because they show kind of the formations of communing and gathering. These are all lino prints that were made after the artist lost his sight. He was remembering practices in Bahrain, practices that are really linked to the sea and the land of an island that he was from, all from memory. But he was making these in the 90s when these very islands were being land reclaimed, and now it's a big, fat square. And all of the islands have disappeared. And I think the grief of being an islander and witnessing like an archipelago turn into one piece of land is a kind of grief that is, it's a very specific kind of grief. So I wanted to bring two sound offerings because our biennial is so much in the body and so much in the ear. And I wanted to kind of bring forth two sounds that speak to, maybe just before we start this one, that speak to these two types of grief that I feel we're starting to hold through the many commissions that are emerging in the biennial. This first is an image of a film still from Chabayesh, which is a film by Alia Farid, who's one of the artists that is working on a commission for the biennial. Alia has been working in the Iraqi marshlands, which is a site of, it's one of the largest wetlands left in the world. It was drained in the 90s by Saddam Hussein and is currently being restituted and fixed. But I think within this geography, we see a kind of story, which I see a lot in the region, in the Arab region, which is a kind of like estrangement to nature and to land. And here, Alia Farid, who is from Kuwait and Puerto Rico, spent 5 years living with people who are still living on the marshes, who are still kind of living a life that's very much from the Gulf, but it's absolutely embedded in water and with nature. So I'm going to play one of the recordings that Alia made as part of her research there of buffalo calling.
أنا اسمي جاسم.
شنو اسم الجواب؟
المثل الحمراء، القرحة، البرشة، هاي إيه كلهم عدت نسامهم. إيه الحوبين بعد الخدين. إيه الفحل نبقى عند مثل شنو إيه هاي اسمها الحيلة، القرحة. إيه. جاسم. ايوه تعال ايش ايوه تعال قرحة تعال ما قرحة ايوه تعال ما حمر تعال ايوه تعال ايش تعال
Let's remember how to speak to the nature and our fellow species. The second recording, so this is an image actually from Layla and the Wolves. I'm not going to speak about this work, but I feel like this image is kind of how I imagine artworks can commune and convene people, and the power of a feminist gathering and women gathering together. I'm really interested, as someone from the Gulf, to also center stories, artists, and histories that aren't part of the mainstream storytelling and narrative of a place like the Gulf that has been projected on so much as a space of the future, as a space of oil and glam and glass towers. And so there's I'm going to be sharing here. These are the next slide. Maybe we can go to. These are stills from another film by Hani Surur. This is a film that was made in 1974. Hani Surur is a Lebanese filmmaker. She was one of the few filmmakers that actually went to Dhafar in the 60s. The Dhafar is in Amman, and there was a rebellion there in the 1960s against the British. It was a feminist guerrilla rebellion, and there are many songs and stories that are not remembered today that speak to what it means to have a leftist revolution in a space like the Gulf, the alternative history that could have been. So I'm going to share. We're going to be sharing some of the documents, photos from the very few archives that remain from the rebellion as part of the biennial. But we're also working with an artist called Bint Mbarah, who has been relearning some of the protest songs sang by the women in the Dhafar. And so she shared a recording of her and her sister singing The Hour of Liberation Has Arrived, ساعة التحرير دقت. So here's Bint Mbarah.
ساعة التحرير دقت برا يا استعمار، سوف يتحدى وجودك شعبنا الجبار، شعبنا الواعي مسلح قوة وإيمان، للكفاح نادى بصوت يزعج الطغيان، انهار والأفكار ضاعت خشية الشجعان، تسحق العدوان دوما إرادة الأحرار، ساعة التحرير دقت برا يا استعمار، سوف يتحدى وجودك شعبنا الجبار، جيلنا الثوري مصمم للنضال الشاق، يضرب الأعداء بعنف داخل الأعماق، لا شروط الصلح يقبل لا على الإطلاق، سلاحنا الفتاك يجاوب عننا بالنار، ساعة التحرير دقت برا يا استعمار.
I'll briefly translate some of it. because I feel the sentiment of this song is the sentiment that so many of us feel now. The hour of liberation has arrived, imperialist out. Our people are conscious and armed. It alarms our oppressors. The will of the people shall defeat the aggressor. We're ready for the heart fight. Rise with courage. Remember the past oppression and poverty, but move forward. Turn Armand's oppression into light. Arab workers and students, unite. Unite! So even though I began with heartbreak, heartbreak always comes with hope. And I'm just really excited that we're synchronizing our tempos together as we step forward in this biennial. Everything worthwhile is done with other people, as Mariam Kaba says. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Ocean Space, for hosting us. We can't wait to host you in Sharjah. See you in Sharjah, February 6th.